Hopefully, it was a wonderful Yom Tov.
Baruch Hashem.
I
Very
think we
nice.
only had one bad day of rain. I think the rest of the Yom Tov was very nice.
We're here in Toronto.
No, in
Oh,
Orlando.
and yeah, in Orlando. Yeah, it was. We had a beautiful time. I didn't mind a little rain. Uh,
We had all four seasons.
yeah, I stay out of the sun anyway. So,
Okay, so
uh,
Baruch Hashem.
yeah.
Okay, so we are up to the Mishnah on Daf Tzadik Beis Amud Aleph. Three lines to the top. Kol Karbanei Satzibor Ein Bahen Smicha. Chutz min apar haba al kol mitzvah. So smicha is primarily for karbanos of a yochid. But there are kabbanas at tzibur that there's smicha done as well, and one of them is the par haba al kol mitzvahs, which is the par helam dovish al tzibur, meaning if Bez and Paskin for Klal Yisrael about a certain aver that's chayiv kares, and they advised them that it's mutter to do, and they did it, this par is brought, and a smicha is done on that par. Useir HaMishtalech, as well as the Sir Mishalech, the Sir Lazozel of Yom Kippurim, there was also a smicha done. Rab Shimon Omer, Af Seir Avoidus Kochavim. A Seir Avoidus Kochavim is a carbon that is brought by the Tzibur if Bezdin Paskin for them that an Avoidus Zara was mutter and they were Ovid Avoidus Zara. So any of there that's a Chiv Chorus is the Par Helam Davish Tzibur or the Parabal Kal Mitzvahs. The one of there that's singled out to have a separate carbon under that same scenario is the Sira Avodah Kachav. Kol karbanos hayachetun tzmicha chutz min habechar v'hamayser v'pesach. These individual karbanos are not mechuyev to have smicha. V'hayoresh. What if someone yarshins the carbon of his father? His father designated a carbon, and then he yarshined it. Soymech, he does do smicha on the carbon that was designated by his father. Umevi nesachim, he also is responsible to bring the accompanying nesachim for the carbon. Umeimar, and he's also qualified to do tamura. Although tamura is allowed to do tamura, but if he did it and it's his father's carbon, the tamura would be effective. But if a stranger did tamura on someone else's carbon, it has zero impact. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan. Kol karbanos hatzibur ein bahen smicha. All tzibur karbanos do not have smicha. Chutz mi par haba al kol mitzvahs useirei avodas kachavim divrei Rab Shimon, which is somewhat consistent with Rab Shimon in our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah Rab Shimon said af seir avodas kachavim, which would then lead us to believe that three Karbanos Tzibur require smicha, parabal kol mitzvos, sir mishalech, and the sir avodas kachavim. In this brisa, it seems to indicate that it's only the sir avodas kachavim and the parham dov tzibur, and for some reason the sir mishalech is omitted. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, sir avodas kachavim ein bahen smicha. There is no smicha by sir avodas kachavim. So therefore, who else? What other carbon must be the one that requires smicha? V'smicha sihira mishtalech. Frank the Gemara loy sagi the loy ma'il. Just because Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and he holds that the sir avodas kachavim doesn't have smicha, what's the necessity to replace the sir mishtalech, the sir avodas kachavim, with the sir mishtalech? Just say that only one carbon tzibur gets smicha, which is the par haba al kol mitzvahs. Amar Avina, because Gemiri, they knew halacha l'Moshe Sinai ish pi'ish. They knew that shtei smichos b'tzibur. They knew that there were two karbanos tzibur that required smicha. So they knew there has to be two. So if it wouldn't be the seir of Kachavim, then it must be the seir hamishtalech. Amar loy Rab Shimon. So Rab Shimon said to Rabbi Yehuda, how can you suggest that there is smicha? How can you suggest that there is smicha by the Sir Mishalech? We know that only Bailim can do smicha. V'zeh arenu bonav soimchim boy. And the Sira Mishtaleach, the Semicha is done by arenu bonav, as it says in the Torah on Yom Kippur. Amar loy, av zeh arenu bonav miskaper boy. So they told him the Sira Mishtaleach is not a korban exclusively for Yisraelim. It covers Leviim and Kohanim as well. So the fact that Aaron Uvon of Soimchim Boy is not a contradiction to Ein Smicha Ela B'Bailam, because they're also from the Bailam of the Seir HaMishtalech. So now we're going to get into a machlokes. Who is the Seir HaMishtalech mechaper for? Is it also mechaper for the Kohanim, or is it mechaper only exclusively for Yisrael? So clearly Reb Shimon holds that the Seir HaMishtalech has an impact on the kapara of all of Klal Yisrael, including the Kohanim. Amar B'Yirmiyah v'Azdu l'Tamayu. This machlokes that we've just expressed, that we just presented between Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda, as to whether or not the Seir HaMishtalech is in the list of the two karbanos that require Semicha B'Bailam. The Tanya, we have the following brisa. It says v'chiper es mikdash hakodesh. Where does it say this? V'chiper es mikdash hakodesh v'es oil moyed v'es mizbeach yichaper v'ala kohanim v'kolam hakol yichaper. This is v'yikra tesvav, which is in Nachrimois, which is in the karbanos that are related to Yom Kippur. So the Gemara, the brisa darshans this path. That's referring to Lefnai v'Lefnim. Now we know that the Karbanos on Yom Kippur are Mechaper, Mantumash, Mikdash, v'Kadoshav. So this is somebody who came in by mistake to the Kodesh HaKodeshim where they were Tamei. Ves Oil Moed is a Heichel. That's referring to somebody who came into the Heichel. Mizbeach Kemashmoi. Someone who went out to the Mizbeach when he was Tamei. Yechaper Elu Hazaris. That's referring to somebody who came into the Hazar when they're Tamei. Kohanim Kemashmoin. The Kohanim are going to get a kapara from this. Al Kol Am Hakol Elu Yisrael. And Yechaper Elu Halavim. So everybody's included in this kapara. Hushvu Kulon Lichapara Achas. All of Klal Yisrael are under this umbrella of the kapara. Shemischaperin b'seir mishtalech. In what korban do every single yid get a kapara from? That is the seir hamishtalech. Zok the Bach. B'shar averos Dir Yehuda. So it's not referring to Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav, because there's individual karbanos on Yom Kippur that are specifically for Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav, but where they all share the same kapara is on the Shir Mishtalech, which is mechaper on other averos. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kishem Shedam Seir Hanasa B'Fnim Mechaper Al Yisrael Al Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav, just like the Dam HaSeir, the Seir Lashem, which was the dam was spritzed in the Kodesh Kodeshim. Just like that is Mekadosh on Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav of Klal Yisrael. Kach dam apar, which is the parish iron, mechaper ala kohanim al Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav. So Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav for Klal Yisrael is done through the Seir Lashem, and for the kohanim it's on the par. Uchashem, I believe that this basis adds a vov. Uchashem shavidui shall Seir hamishtalech al Yisrael b'shar averos, just like the vidui that was said on the Seir hamishtalech is mechaper for Klal Yisrael b'shar averos, kach vidu shall par mechaper al kohanim b'shar averos. So here you see clearly that the Tanakama over here holds that the Tanakama over here holds that the kapara for shar averos, the kapara for shar averos that the kohanim get is not from the Seir HaMishtalech, rather it's from the par that's brought by the kohanim. Rab Shimon, so Rab Shimon ha vaday hushvu. So we're quoting over here Rab Shimon as saying I mixed it up, I believe. It's Reb Shimon who says that the Seir Mishtalech was only mechaper on Yisrael, but it wasn't mechaper on the Kohanim. So the problem is the pasuk seems to indicate not like Reb Shimon, because the pasuk uses the word yichaper, which includes everybody in Klal Yisrael. So there's for sure something that there's a common thread between the Kohanim and all of Klal Yisrael, because the pasuk says and brings everyone together. So there's obviously one unifying factor. But you, Reb Shimon, who's saying that the Siyar Mishtalech is only going to be mechaber for Klal Yisrael, and it's the power that's a mechaber for Kohanim. Where is the hushvu? Where is it that they're both having a kapara from the same place? How about the hushvu? Zok more in hushvu. Yes, they do have a similarity that the bnei kapara ninu. Everyone gets a kapara on Yom Kippur, and that's all it means by yechaper, but not necessarily with the same carbon. Miu kol chad v'chad mechaper b'didavshei. So Rabbi Yehuda holds yechaper is an indication that there's one carbon that's mechaper for all of Klal Yisrael, including the Kohanim. That would be the Siyar Mishtalech. According to Reb Shimon, that the Siyar Mishtalech only impact Klal Yisrael, and the Shire of theirs that the Kohanim have, their kapara comes from the power of Aharon. The Yechaper, which includes everybody, means they all get a kapara, but not necessarily through the same carbon. Zokti Braisavaiter. Rabbi Yehuda, Tumas, Mikdash, V'Kadoshov, Yisrael, for the rest of Klal Yisrael, is Mechapri, B'dam Seir, Anasa B'fnim, and Tumas, Mikdash, V'Kadoshov of the Kohanim is B'par Shal Aron, and B'shar Averos, Elu V'Elu Mechapri, B'vidoi Shal Seir HaMishtalech. But by the Shar Averos, Rabbi Yehuda holds, Yichaper, everybody gets the same kapara through the Seir HaMishtalech. Ula Reb Shimon, B'shar Averos Nami, Kohanim B'vidu Dapar Miskapri, they have their kapara for all Averos, even the Shar Averos, from the par. Kidikatani, Echad Yisrael, V'echad Kohanim, V'echad Kohen Mashiach. They all got a kapara. But Ma Bein Yisrael l'Kohanim, u'l'Kohen Mashiach, Ela, Shedam Mapar Mechaper l'Kohanim, Al Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshov, Zudiv Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Keshem Shedam Ha'Seir Anasa B'Fnim, Mechaper Al Yisrael, Kach Dam Mapar Mechaper l'Kohanim, and Keshem Shevidu Shal Seir Mishtalech, Mechaper Al Yisrael, Kach Vidu Shal Par Mechaper Al Kohanim. So the machlokes between Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda is as follows: by the Seir Mishtalech, is that representing all of Klal Yisrael, or is that only representing Klal Yisrael but not the Kohanim? Reb Shimon knows it's Klal Yisrael and not the Kohanim. Who did the Semicha and the Vidui for the Seir Mishtalech? It was the Kohen. It wasn't done by them. Therefore, Reb Shimon says the Semicha of the carbon tzibur that we see there's two karbanis tzibur that Semicha is done is the parallel of shel tzibur and the seir avodas kachav. Tanu Rabbana v'samchu ziknei ha'eda es yideim al roish hapar. So let's see where it says this. This is referring to, I believe, the par helam davar shel tzibur. It says v'samchu ziknei ha'eda es yideim al roish hapar lefnei Hashem. V'shochet is apar lefnei Hashem. I believe this is speaking about the par helam dover shel tzibur. And we learn from here, a roish par. We're limiting the smicha davka to the roish par. Par ton smicha, the ein seirei avodas kechavim tunin smicha. But the seir avodas kechavim does not require smicha. So if you look up the psukim, the Torah talks about the par helam shel tzibur. And then it talks about the Par Kohen Mashiach, and then it talks about the Seir Avodah Zarah. All those korbanos are listed in that parsha. But from the fact that it says Al Rosh Hapar tells us that the Seir Avodah Kechavim is excluded from Semicha. Divi Rabbi Yehuda. Because, of course, as we said in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda holds the only other carbon tzibur that needs Semicha besides the Par Helam Dov Shel Tzibur is the Seir Mishalech. But Rabbi Shimon Eimer, par ton smicha b'zkenim ve'ein seirei avodas kechavim ton smicha b'zkenim. What's unique about the par is that who does the smicha the Zekanim of Klal Yisrael, not necessarily the Kohanim, because this is a par that's representing all of Klal Yisrael. But the Seirei Avodas Kechavim, they don't get Smicha b'Zekanim, but they does get Smicha Ela ba'Aharon. The Smicha on the Seirei Avodas Kechavim is done by the Kohen. Uramini, Frek the Gemara Astira in Reb Shimon. So here we just said that Reb Shimon holds that the Seir Avodas Kechavim gets Smicha by the Kohen Gadol, but not through the Zekanim. The problem is we have another brayso that seems to contradict Reb Shimon Shita in this prat. It says Hachai. So let's look at the pasuk inside. V'somach Aaron nishteyadav al reish asar Hachai. V'yisvadalav v'savonis b'nei Yisrael v'eskol b'shem l'chol chatoisam. This is referring to the Sir Lazazel. So it says by the Sir Lazazel, Hachai ton smicha ve'ein seirei avodas kechavim tunin smicha. Davka the seir Hachai, meaning the seir mishtalech, brought on Yom Kippur, required smicha, but it excludes the seir avodas kechavim that would not require smicha. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds there's no smicha at all done for a seir avodas kechavim. But Rabbi Shimon Omer, he has a slightly different drasha. He says, Chai ton smicha b'Aharon. The seir mishtaleach, that gets smicha by a kohen gadol. However, the ein seir avodas kechavim to unin smicha b'Aharon ela b'Zekanim. Who does the smicha for the seir avodas kechavim? That's the Ziknei Yisrael. So we have a stira. Because over here, Rabbi Shimon says that the seir avodas kechavim has smicha, and who does the smicha? The Zekanim. On the Aleph, Rabbi Shimon said, who does the smicha for the seir avodah zarah? Rabbi Shimon Omer, par tom smicha b'Zekanim, vein seir avodah kechavim ton smicha b'Zekanim ela b'Aharon. So here Rabbi Shimon says it's the kohen who does smicha on the seir avodah kechavim, and this brayso says that the seir avodah kechavim gets smicha by the Zekanim. So the question is, who is it? Who does the smicha according to Rabbi Shimon on the seir avodah zarah? Is it the Zekanim or is it the Kohanim? Rab Sheshes v'tizbra dahach kamaisa mitaratztahi. Would you think that the first of these two braysos that we just quoted is a mitaratzta? It's a reliable brayso? It's absolutely not. So we're defaulting that what's the real shita of Rab Shimon, that the seir avodas kechavim gets smicha by the Zekanim, by its bailam, not by the Kohanim. And I'll prove to you that the earlier brayso that states that Rab Shimon holds that the seir avodas kechavim gets smicha with the Kohanim is a mistake. How do I know that? Because ha'amar Rab Shimon smicha bebailim ba'inon. We know that Rab Shimon has an overarching shita that smicha always must be done by the bailim. So how could the seir avodas kechavim get smicha from the Kohanim and need smicha b'bailim? It would need smicha by the Zekanim. So it's impossible that was Reb Shimon Shita, that the seir avodas kechavim would have smicha by the Kohanim. Ela tritzachi, you're going to have to slightly modify the first price. Rabbi Yehuda's Shita was hapar. Par ton smicha ve'ein seirei avodas kechavim tudin smicha divrei Rabbi Yehuda. There's no smicha at all for seir avodas kechavim. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Hachai, which is the diuk that we're making from the Sir Lazazel, Hachai ton smicha. The Sir Lazazel requires smicha be'aharon, through Aharon HaKoyin, but the ein seirei avodas kechavim to unin smicha be'aharon ela b'Zekanim. So we're learning a completely different nusach in the first brayso, where Reb Shimon says that who does the smicha on the seir avodas kechavim, it's the Zekanim, which is consistent with what Reb Shimon said in the second brayso as well. Ve'in seirei avodas kechavim to smicha b'Aharon ela b'Zekanim. V'hachi ka'amar Reb Shimon Rabbi Yehuda, and this is an elaboration on the conversation that occurred between Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. So just to focus for a moment, Rabbi Yehuda is using the diuk of hapar, the diuk of the smicha by the parham b'shal tzibur, to define what's the halacha by the seir avodas kechavim. That's actually local in that same parish over there, while Reb Shimon is using the pasuk of a seir achai, which is not even in that parsha. Rather, it's talking about the Sir Lazazal Yom Kippur to define the Seir of Avodas Kochavim. In that respect, they're similar. They're both a Seir. So Zog to Gemara, Amalei Rab Shimon Rab Yehuda, Seir Avodas Kochavim Bo Smicha. I disagree with you, and I hold that the Seir Avodas Kochavim does require Smicha. V'shmiya loch the loibo Smicha, and if you heard from Sami Rebbe that in fact there's no Smicha on the Seir Avodas Kochavim, you didn't hear that there's no Smicha at all. What you must have heard was Aharon who the Shemialach. Maybe you heard that the Kohen doesn't do Smicha, but there definitely is Smicha. And Umiuta Meachayhu. And the miut is from Chai. The Seir Achai, there's Smicha by the Kohanim. The Seir Avodas Kochavim, there's Smicha by the Zakenim. Zot Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda, Lamali Lim Atinu Mikra. I don't understand. The Torah tells us about Smicha by the Param Dovishal Tzibur. The Torah tells us Smicha about the Sir Mishtalech. The Torah doesn't tell us beferish that Smicha is required by a Seir of Avodas Kochavim. Why do I need a pasuk hapar to tell you that there's no Smicha by the Seir of Avodas Kochavim? Why would I think there is Smicha? The Torah doesn't tell it to us. Ravina said, Gemiri shtei smichos b'tzibur. We know there's only two smichos b'tzibur. Once Rabbi Yehuda uses his allotment for the par halandol v'shel tzibur and for the par koyin and for the sira mishtaleach, so that's the allotment. Why in the world would you think that there would be a third carbon, the sira v'kachavim, that requires smicha if you've already used up your allotment of two? And for the Gemara, Girsa Ba'alma. Girsa Ba'alma. What does Girsa Ba'alma mean? So we actually have a shaila. So Rashi over here says, Kleber Vadai Loi Tzarech Limutinu Tvei Mikroi. Hitaka didn't need the pasuk because from the process of elimination, he used up his allotment already. So there is no other carbon that would get smicha. Elalahachi Hadar Umaitinu. The reason why we darshened it from this pasuk, Mishum Girsa Ba'alma Shetei Ragel, so people should be familiar that the Shtei Smichas B'tzibur V'sulai, the Kraya Smachta Ba'alma. It's just in the Smach, that's not really the limud. The real source of the halacha is the fact that we know Gemiri that there are only two Smichas. There's another pshat, Girsa Ba'alma Vadi Lo Tzrichi Kroi, I take it only the pasuk, L'kach Kiblo Rabbi Yehuda Mei Rabbi B'loshen Zeh. This is how Rabbi Yehuda was makabelit from his Rebbe. Ula Rab Shimon, Af al Gav, the Marba, Seiri Avodas Kochavim L'smicha. Rab Shimon held he had a right from he had diukim to show that in fact that the Seiri Avodas Kochavim did have smicha. Afilochi leka elabei smichas betzibur. There's still only two smichas. So you have to wonder there's two smichas. The par and Bavashal Tzibur is from first to the third smicha. The par. The Seir Avodas Kochavim he's claiming has smicha, but the Seir Mishtalech has smicha as well. So how is there two? There's three. The Gamar Beis Smicha is B'tzibur, Rab Shimon Hainu Bebailim. He meant there's two smichas Bebailim. The Seir Mishtalech might have a smicha, but it's not the Bailim that's doing the smicha, because the Bailim is Klal Yisrael, and the smicha is done by the Kohen. Seir Mishtalech ein ton smicha Bebailim. The Bnei Aaron Rab Shimon ein miskaprin b'Seir Mishtalech. As we illustrated a moment ago, that according to Reb Shimon, the Kohanim do not get a kapara from the Seir Mishtalech. Aval Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold to this rule that smicha can only be done by the Bailam. Therefore, it's true. Okay, that's how the Rashi learns Girsa Ba'alma. Means Girsa Ba'alma is the limud, the real source of the fact that the Seir Avodas Kochavim does not have smicha is the limitation of two that we have in Kabbalah. Rashi Ksaviyad has a different shot which Tosfos quotes, so we'll just learn it in Tosfos. Lish nachrina pirish b'kundris koloimar Rabbi Yehuda lesle halacha l'Moshe misinai b'shtei smichos ela begirsa ba'al menachos v'yalef lu mikroi. So we had another text that is punkvakeret. Not that the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is the real source, and the psukim were just like in the smachta. Rather, it's the psukim that's the real limud, and there is no halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And Tosfos has a problem with that. The kosher the beper kol menachos bois matzah porach v'yuzavach zivche shalmi tzibur tu'unim smicha mikal v'chaymer umeshani, and we said gemiri shtei smicha is betzibur. The Gemara there asks, we have a kal v'chaymer that should be mechayiv shalmi tzibur smicha, and the kal v'chaymer was they have tnufa sai when they're alive and sai after they're shechted, and so and how can you say they surely have to have it, because the regular shlomim has smicha with only one tenufa. They have two tenufas for sure. They should have smicha. That was the kal v'chomer, and the Gemara answered it that we have a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So you see, it's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai of the limitation of two karbanos tzibur to have smicha. That's a deciding factor. So how could you learn over here that there's no halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Okay, so that is a discussion. But I'll call upon them just to take a little bit of an inventory over here. Is according to Rabbi Yehuda, we have halacha that there's a maximum of two karbonis that have smicha, and he used his allotment for the par el mavashal tzibur, where the Torah says beferish there is a smicha, and for the seir mishtalech, which the Torah says there's a smicha, and therefore sirei avodas kachavim do not have smicha. Rabbi Shimon said Sira Mishlech doesn't count, even though there's a smicha, because it's not smicha b'bailim. It's the kohen doing the smicha. That's not what we call smicha. We're talking about smicha b'bailim, and the two karbonis that have smicha b'bailim are the Sira Avodah and the Par Helam Dover Shel Tzibur. Gewaltig. Reb Shimon Seirei Avodah Kachavim the boy smicha minolan. He's insistent that the Sira Avodah Kachavim smicha. Where does he know that from? Zakman Nafkalon Miditanya. It says v'samach yadai al roish hasoir. Where does it say this? Zokt. Let's look at the pasuk. V'samach yadai al roish hasoir. You gotta always find these psukim. V'samach aharin eshtei yadav al roish hasoir hachai. No, this is it. V'samach yadai al roish hasoir v'shachat oisai b'mkoim asher yishchat es ha'oila l'fnei Hashem. This is Vayikra Dalid, so this is talking about the seer of the Nosi, because one of the karbonis discussed in the set of the Param of Shulzibur, the seer of Avodah was also of Asher Nosi Yechta. If a Nosi does an aver that requires a korban chatos, he brings a seir, a male, instead of a female that a normal person brings if they have an aver that requires a chatos. So it says v'samach yodei al roish hasoir by the seer of the Nasi. So let's see how he darshans it. V'samach yodei al roish hasoir l'rabbis. You know where else there was a smicha? L'rabbis seir nachshoin l'smicha. What was the seir nachshoin? The seir nachshoin was the seirim that was brought by the Nesiim. By the Nesiim, they did smicha. How do we know it? From v'samach yodei al roish hasoir, it's marba another seir l'smicha, the seir nachshon divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, no, l'rabbi seirei avodas kachavim l'smicha. The makar of smicha by the seir avodas kachavim is from the seir nasi. Shahir Rabbi Shimon Aimer kol chatos shenichnas dama l'fnim. Any chatos where the dam will be spritzed, not on the mizbech hachitzayin, but in the Heichal, to una smicha. And we know that the Sira Avodah the Zrikas Adam, was done in the Heichal. And therefore, it requires smicha. Zok Gemara, Lama li lememra shahaya. Why do you need this added bit of information? Shahaya Rab Shimon Aimer, kol chata shenichnas dam alafnim to una smicha. We're learning it out of Hasair. Hasair is a limud. Not only is the Seir Nasi requiring smicha, so to another Seir, which Rab Shimon applies to the Seir Avodas Kachavim. Why do we need a secondary reason that any carbon, any chatos that the dam is b'fnim needs smicha? That's a whole independent reason. Why was it necessary? So Gemara, simna ba'alma. That was just a siman. That's not a real limud. The real limud is from Bahasair, but he has a siman to it. As Rashi said, the cholchatos shenichnas dama needs smicha, but it's not really the makar of the halacha. The makar of the halacha is from hasair. Frag the Gemara. V'emes hanasa b'fnim dumya. V'emes hanasa b'fnim. Who said what we're referring to is the seir avodas kechavim? Maybe it's referring to the seir Lashem brought on Yom Kippur. Maybe that's the riboy to tell us that there should be smicha done on that seir. Because remember, from the seir Lashem and seir Lazozel, there was smicha done on the seir Lazozel, but there's no mention of smicha done on the seir Lashem. Maybe from the hasair, you should learn that the seir Lashem brought on Yom Kippur requires smicha. Why apply it to the seir avodas kechavim? So Gemara, dumya de seir nasi the mechaper alaveros mitzvah yedua. We v'hasair, the makar is the seir nasi. The seir nasi is brought when a nasi does a defined avera. It's for a defined avera. It's not for a general category. A maybe. It's done for a defined avera. So therefore, v'hasair, if the pasuk is talking about the seir nasi, which there's a defined avera for, let's apply it to another chatos that's brought for a defined avera, like the seir avodas kechavim, where there was a violation that we know about. That's where it would be appropriate to apply this lesson, but not to the seir of Yom Kippur, which is metam al mikdash kachim. But that's, we don't know if they were over. Just in case somebody was over, so it'll cover for you. But it's not for the specific avera. Therefore, it's more appropriate to apply the limud for the din smicha from seir nasi to seir avodas kechavim. Zok Ravina de Amar Gemiri Shtei Semicha Betzibor. Ravina, who taught us that, according to Reb Shimon, there is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that there's two semichas betzibur. Kroi lamali. Why do I need the pasuk to tell me vasair that applies to seir avodas kechavim? We know we have to find another one. So that should tell us that it applies to the seir avodas kechavim. So no, itzrich hilchasa v'itzrich kroi. I need both. The imikra. If I only had a pasuk, I might have thought that who said you apply the halach of smicha to seir avodas kechavim from the vahasair? Maybe you should apply it to zivchei shalmei tzibur. That's the seir that requires the smicha. And they take the whole gears out. It's quoting a whole different Gemara. Zog to Gemara, Avo. So I would have thought it applies to Shalmei Tzibur. The Ima Hilchasa. So therefore, Isrich Hilchasa, I need the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The Ima Hilchasa, and if I only no, I would have thought that apply it to a third. Don't only apply the halacha of smicha to a seir avodas kechavim. Apply it to a third carbon of Shalmei Tzibur as well, because we could learn it out of a Kal V'chomer. We might as well learn this because this is a chazara of the Gemara in Zvachim. If you remember, the Gemara there said, Omer Rab Shimon shloisha minin tu'unin shlosh mitzvahs. There was tenufa b'chayim, there's tenufa after the animal was killed, and there was smicha. And Rab Shimon said there's three karbonos, that each one of these three karbonos required two of the three in the set. So the Gemara wanted to say that the Shalmei Tzibur we should be able to learn that out of a Kal V'chomer. Lazy b'Kal V'chomer v'yuzivchei Shalmei Tzibur tu'unin smicha. So zivchei Shalmei Tzibur has tenufa b'chai and tenufa after the animal is killed, but it doesn't need smicha. But through a Kal V'chomer, let's say it needs smicha. Mikal V'chomer ma Shalmei yochid ma decharega l'shlomim she'ein tu'unin tenufa chayim. No tenufa is done when the animal's alive. Yet tu'unin smicha chayim, you get the smicha. The Shalmei Tzibur, which is the shlomim of the kivsei atzeres, that there's tenufa b'chayim while the animal's alive, and there's tenufa after the animal's dead, after the shechita, surely it should require smicha as well. There was such a Kal V'chomer. So for that we have the halacha l'Moshe to say that smicha and the carbon tzibur is limited to two karbanos, and the allotment was already used for the paral and b'shal tzibur and the seir avodas zarah. So why couldn't we just have the halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Why do we need a pasuk about hasair? Because lo yadina and hainino. I wouldn't have known which to apply to. Maybe I would have applied it to the seir Who said I should apply it to the Sir of Adizara? Maybe I could have applied it to Shalmei Tzibor. Kamash Malon, Dumya de Sirnosi, the Mechaper Alaveris Mitzvah Yidua. The whole comparison to the Sirnosi is that it's for a specific Avera that we know is violated. That similarity only applies to a Sir of Adizara. So that's the Maskana, how we know, according to Reb Shimon, that the Sir of Adizara requires the Smicha, and it's what takes up one of the two of the allotment. So at the end of the day, there's, according to Reb Shimon, the allotment is given to Parhel and Davar Shal Tzibur, which it says in the Torah that there's a din smicha, and it also applies to Sir Avodas Kachavim, where there's a din smicha that we know from Vasair, and even though the Sir Mishalech, the Torah says beferish that there's smicha for, that's not on this list, because that's not smicha b'bailim, because Reb Shimon knows that the Sir Mishalech is mechaber on Klal Yisrael, yet Aaron HaKohen is the one, the Kohen Gadol is the one who does the smicha, that doesn't count. Reb Yehuda, on the other hand, holds that there was no smicha at all by the Sir Avodas Kachavim, because we're medayik dafka, the par Helab Davar Shal Tzibur gets smicha, but not the Sir Avodas Zarah. And the two karbonis that get smicha are the Parel and Davar Shal Tzibur and the Sir Mishtalech, which Rabbi Yehuda learns the Sir Mishtalech is mechaper on all of Klal Yisrael. Zogt Gemara weiter. Kol karbonis hayochid to unin smicha. All karbonis yochid require smicha chutz mi bechar u'ma'isur Pesach. Tanabonim. It says three times in the parasha of Shlomim that it needs smicha, and we're medayik karbonoi v'loya bechar. One karbonoi excludes a bechar that does not get smicha. Sheyachal, I might have thought that a bechar should get smicha. V'loydinu huma Shlomim she'ein kedushas had meirechem. The carbon shlomim, it was born a regular chulun animal, and subsequently the bailim made it into a carbon shlomim. Yet to unin smicha. So bechar shekedushas had meirechem, the bechar that's kadosh from the moment it's conceived. Ein oidin sheton smicha. Surely it should need smicha. Talmud Leimer karbonai v'loya bechar. That's why it says karbonai to be b'mai davka. A shlomim gets smicha, not a bechar. We have another karbonai v'loy meiser. A meiser behema doesn't get smicha. Sheyachal v'ladinu u'mashlomim she'ein mekachin l'fnei mulachareim. By the shlomim, it's only one carbon that gets a kedusha. Nevertheless, to smicha. As we learned yesterday, if by mistake you call the 9th to 10th or the 11th to 10th, they'll both get a kedusha. So maybe it should need smicha as well. There's a third word karbonai in that parsha to tell us karbonai v'loy Pesach. Sheyachal, I would have thought that a carbon Pesach should require smicha. There's no chiyuv to bring it on its own. It's voluntary. There's a chiyuv say to bring the carbon Pesach. Frag the Gemara, why do I need three words karbonai to counteract the Kal V'chomer? Your Kal V'chomer is not a good Kal V'chomer. Because Ikal Mivrach, Mal Shlomim, Shekein Tu'unin Nesachim, Utenuvas Chazav V'shoik. Yet these other karbonos don't have it. So b'chalal there's no kal v'chomer. So why in the world would I think that these three karbonos, Pesach, Meiser, and Bechor, need tenufa, that I need karbonah to be ma'ated? I would never thought that way. So you're right. Kroya smachta ba'alma. We don't really use the psukim of karbonai to be ma'ayed these karbonos. From Semicha, it's just the smachta, but it's really because there is no kal v'chomer. Frank Gemara, but there still are these three extra words of karbonai. What are we going to apply them to? Ela karbonai kashul, ela kroy lamali. Zok Gemara karbonai v'loy karbon chaveiroi. You will not make smicha on your friend's carbon. If you're bringing your friend's carbon, for some reason, you're not going to make smicha. Karbonai v'loy karbon ovid kachavim. If a guy brings a carbon, there's no smicha required. And karbonai l'rabbis kol balei carbon l'smicha. If there are shutfim in a carbon, each and every one of those shutfim has to do smicha. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we're to finish Daf Tzadik Beis, and Be'ezim tomorrow we're going to learn Daf Tzadik Gimel, the day of the bris.